I guess I should start by saying that if you are a supporter of reform, then it might be best if you turn away now. Because when I saw Robert Jenwick, Nigel Farage and Richard Tice sharing a stage, announcing themselves as the future of Britain, the saviours of Britain, the only three guys who could bring salvation to this country of 75 million people. Each of them bringing their own nuttiness to the table. And now with the introduction of Robert Jenwick, who even the most sort of unaware person must see is an opportunist, a man whose personal ambition has eaten away at his own soul. But when I saw them there together at this press conference, I couldn't help but notice the similarity between them and an old political party now long forgotten, but that was on the cusp of power only 35 years ago. Now, those of you who are under about maybe 55 will never have heard of this party, and you'll be amazed really at the story. I'm talking, of course, about the UK Natural Law Party.
When a person practices transcendental meditation and yogic flying, a high degree of integration is produced in brain activity. The person experiences bubbling bliss and stress is dissolved. This is the basis of many practical results in every area of life. Through a group of 7,000 experts in yogic flying, this effect of coherence radiates to the whole nation, bringing down stress and negativity in society and making the nation strong, dynamic and integrated. Over 500 scientific studies have been conducted on the benefits of the programs of the Natural Law Party. Of these, over 40 have shown the benefits of creating coherence through a group of yogic flyers. For example, in this country, a group of yogic flyers has reduced the crime rate in Merseyside by 60% during the last 7 years compared to all the other metropolitan areas in the United Kingdom. Through this program of creating coherence in national consciousness, the Natural Law Party is the only party that can strengthen the sovereignty of the United Kingdom and at the same time create a real union of the European nations.
Now maybe that has stoked a few memories. They got quite a high profile back in the very early 90s. In fact, they fielded a candidate in almost every election district. Over 300 candidates they fielded. And in the following election, it was down to about 200. They did get quite a lot of publicity. And they did present themselves as the only solution to Britain's problems at the time. There are a lot of parallels between the UK Natural Law Party and this version of reform with Farage, Tice and Jenwick there. Mainly because the policy, the singular policy, just as reform only have really one policy, that they would bring a transition into the UK by bouncing up and down on mattresses. And their singular policy to save Britain, 300 candidates, lots of publicity, was to bounce up and down while they were cross-legged on mattresses. And sometimes they would reach heights of, 40, 50 centimetres sometimes. By bouncing, they called it yogic flying. By bouncing on mattresses, they would solve Britain's problems by spreading a positive energy. And they were very specific about how this would be done. They needed a critical mass of 8,000 bouncers across Britain. And if they were to achieve this critical mass, then the country would be completely changed into a wonderful, peaceful, no crime, happy nation. They didn't get their 8,000 bouncers, but they did achieve a smaller critical mass, which was also relevant, which they called their sort of local critical mass, which was about 800 bouncers. And they claimed that they had bounced around in Skelmersdale, which is near Liverpool, so much that they had, and this is empirically true, the data is there, that they had reduced crime in Liverpool over a period of 1 or 2 years, I can't remember what, from one of the worst in the countries to one of the best. And they put it down to their Skelmersdale Bouncing Club. And this reminded me of reform, and reform's sort of ideas and promises. I can see great parallels between the two. They did actually worry that a lot of the energy was seeping out of the UK through the Channel Tunnel at one point. But yogic flying was basically sitting cross-legged on this mattress and then somehow kind of moving yourself until you get a good momentum going and you sort of bouncing up and down. And I think there is as much chance of transformation in the UK by bouncing as there is by Robert Jenwick being in control of one of the great ministries of the UK. In fact, I think that bouncing up and down will probably have more impact than the Reform Party will have on the UK. You know, at the moment we've got Keir Starmer. I'm not going to talk about Keir Starmer being the greatest politician who's ever lived, because clearly he's not, and he does have problems with communication, and he's kind of affable, but he's not charismatic. You know, all this kind of thing. But actually, there was a time when we prayed for a stable pair of hands, just to sort of keep things stable, and many of the things he's doing are interesting and in the right direction, but there is a program to destroy his time in office, and the program is fully active at the moment. And so we now have television stations like GB News and Talk TV, and radio stations, and most of the right-wing paper, and a huge amount on the internet and YouTube, which just devote themselves 24/7 to moaning about Starmer. Think about all that energy. Whether you like Starmer or not, think about the tens and tens of thousands of intelligent people who have devoted their lives to moaning about Starmer. What could they do with that energy? Could they do something that's kind of positive and good? I don't know, locally, maybe in their community? No, they can't. This is the point. You know, you look to reform for some kind of salvation. These three clowns, whereas there's plenty of energy around to make things better. And we should blame ourselves. In fact, we should look to ourselves if we want our salvation, look to our communities. But no, you know, a lot of people are lying around hoping that someone else will save them in some way. You need trusted politicians. You don't need clowns. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'm starting to sound like a political broadcast. I don't really mean to do that. You know, I mean, but if you lose faith in absolutely everything, I have done videos before when I've said that sometimes it's better to believe in nothing rather than just sort of some false belief. There's nothing wrong with believing in nothing. Nobody knows anything anyway. So I wonder whether it would be better for Farage and Tyson Jenwick actually to start bouncing around on mattresses. And it is something that I will put to the party if I can find their email. Because I think that having listened to their, well, it's not a manifesto, it's kind of a couple of things scribbled down on a post-it note. But having read that thing that's scribbled down on a post-it note, I'm not impressed. And I would be more impressed if they could find a way of bouncing around. And if they could find a critical mass of 800 Reform members who would be prepared to bounce around with them, we might be able to see, maybe some improvements in the crime rate in Bradford. 8,000. They keep talking about how many members they've got to reform. Can they not get 8,000 members to bounce around on mattresses, and then we could seal up the Channel Tunnel with concrete. In fact, that probably is a policy of reform anyway. In other words, stop the energy leaking out of the south of the UK. Get the 8,000 reform members bouncing on mattresses, and maybe that critical mass will bring peace on the great land of England. Because, it's all about England, really, with reform, isn't it? They don't really like Scotland. They don't really know where Ireland is. They hate Wales. We know what we're talking about. Happy days. And it's a shame I can't put some video of them flying around because I don't really have the time. I'm going to try and find time in the future, but I try and fit this in alongside, making a living, basically, and looking after the dog and that kind of thing. And so, all right, well, that's my thoughts on those interesting parallels between reform and the UK Natural Law Party, and my public plea to see Jenwick and Farage and Tice get bouncing.